Yeah, try to seed it again. See if it's, try reconnecting it. It went through the box.
Gorsuch.
So you've landed in wall. So far.
I'll never forget it. My first day of seeing them, they had this pile of shit in the closet. There were nobody. And they were like, here, there's the camera and this shit all in the ground. And I, for like 20 minutes, went through everything and organized it and plugged everything in and checked it all out. It didn't seem to work. And they're like, well, do you feel comfortable going out and storing it?
Wonder what that is. It's like a bag of weed.
I guess so.
What's funny is like the hair thing.
It was like, it was like this bunch of shit that they just had thrown in the closet. There was nobody.
But it's
There was nobody's kid.
it
It was
was
just
something
like,
else like he's definitely hates his face.
Oh god, this face. Yeah.
I don't like to think about it.
it lasted like 10 minutes. You know what's going hard. Next thing you know, there's warning lights. What the hell was that?
It was considerable. It was like 20-30%.
So you just said, heck with the box, messed up with
Where's
way to
Marcus?
keep that long. There's like one more little screws that hold the.
They cater to.
Yeah. No, I guess don't mess with it. This thing's gonna start any minute, so I would. What's going on, dude? You doing all right? Good. What's happening? What are you doing? Very good. Who are you with? Deirdre or? Okay. They'll show up. I think they have a close list of these people are coming, and they have this intel to come at the last minute. But I saved a spot up front for and I assume that Hannah will be here. Were you over there with him? I was. Is he on his way?
I can't really speak.
Okay.
Sounds like they are breaking around.
Okay.
Oh, it's Santa.
Okay. It could be the new.
A little close, yeah. Just get close. Closer. Not actually.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, cool. What is it? How do you pronounce it? No, that's longer.
That's more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway. Did you know? Maybe nobody, they're just gonna, somebody down.
Except for
Okay. I'll tell you what, one over here, get comfortable, and if anybody shows up, give them your seat. Any of this is.
They were all going to be building Jacksonville.
So save that.
What? The Tukini, you ever heard of it? A32. It was in the second game. Okay. So the results. Yeah, it was that first.
Was it there?
Actually, it was Pelton's video. Ah, then no worries. It's okay, man. Don't worry about it.
We'll figure it all out in Philly, we'll have a plan in Philly.
There's these Pine Townships.
Right.
And, but Halloween, yeah. And that's why, like, really
Behavior that we're doing, like,
Oh, it'll change.
until like one, maybe. Well, no, but they did for these two behaviors.
We did, but I only saw.
And then, like, we just, oh, that's it.
I mean, you can sit there and do it.
I don't know if there's a little career.
Yeah.
I know,
And they can't do all things.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hear Trump say that it might not be include it all. Make sure we know which end this thing is, so that they don't waste time.
Did he film it himself or did someone else?
They're gonna have to take that blade off.
Oh, so it's from the ground. Yeah. That's terrible.
Everybody has their hands on it. Sessions, supposed to be training. Yeah.
Yeah, but that goes on.
Were they out there themselves?
Baratta's committee just suspended the rules to get passed through it.
Of course. Like, say, have a forum?
Well, yeah, the Democrats boycotted.
Well, it's
2-minute heads up.
Oh, you said.
They said it's the biggest group they've had. I've never been.
It's a time for everyone to be on the right.
Well, don't you think the pressure is on now? Because they've got a window, and that window is starting to shut.
There's definitely, there should be a window.
Yeah. You're talking about the guy that's in the top of the second baseman?
Yeah, they keep, they got a new center.
Oh, when did they do that? Oh, okay, I didn't hear about that.
I told you that's cute, like, black.
Where do you play? Prospects.
They're gonna use their Christian class.
Right.
Either transfer or go on.
Right, right. They gave up the guy that was promised that struggled. Yeah. Julio, right, yeah. Yeah, I heard.
Look here, close, look this way. Okay. Thanks for the heads up.
I gave them the heads up. You.
I thought you were
2 minutes was 10 minutes ago.
Should have gone over earlier.
You're good today. I've learned something.
They talk about
What
what?
I said we should have gone over
Groundhog
earlier.
Day.
Yeah, they should. Still moving.
Still remembering how to get back.
And the thing that was really, he had a very favorable conversation. He decided.
Oh.
Before he started to really break out.
Sure. And it's what, cheap for another 2 years? Oh, that's not worth it. They got it for how long? That's at a reduced rate. That's part of the discussion. And the learners are there.
Did McConnell ask him?
I'm the guy.
Yeah.
Say nice things.
Well, you had to resign Strasburg. You
Get
were
more
not
help.
prospect.
Say nice things. So don't wanna come back.
Yeah. Yeah, I
That
have
was
a
sad,
feeling
that was
he's.
sad. He's everyone's favorite.
Yeah, but see, yeah.
The funny thing is, we talk about three races.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know
one.
anyone. I don't know anyone.
Yeah.
It's real.
Well, it was more that the.
Damn it.
Yeah, but you can't deny his awesomeness. Yeah. One of the best, but yeah. I always thought that was hard. I like to have some prospects and let them walk. They're just pretenders. I'm not a baseball guy.
It's from his construction worker days. Look at the safety level of that shirt. Wow. Come on back.
Yeah.
Come on back. Slow down.
Going to Florida.
Mr. Emmett.
Yeah, Mr. Emmett. Pablo's name now. Pablo.
Yeah, you trained her right.
Don Pablo here, Pablo.
Yeah,
He just transferring from Chicago.
No, no, no.
I heard that he didn't. I heard somebody spread the rumor that he didn't. So we started calling him Pablo no Pablo.
So, that's funny.
Because you're so close to everything. Yeah.
Every time I spell months by email, autocorrect changes it to minivans. Pablo minivan.
I mean, that's what it translates to.
Obviously.
Yeah. So you could be down there.
Yeah, so you go down there.
2 minutes.
Smart.
Story and all.
That's it. You gotta use all your skills. In Florida,
No, it was just
like brand new. Yeah, where is that? West Palm, brand new facility. What was the name of the town? Oh, Viera.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no much,
Yeah, I
never actually saw the video.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
it's called,
I thought the stove was funny because he wanted to do it better because his stove is different, yeah. You know something's happening.
I was gonna say, I did it a couple times in the summer. That's like being on Mars.
cousin going down there.
He's on the phone a lot.
Stay indoors.
Right, I didn't know that. Oh, my God.
It's rough. You gotta drink a lot of water. All the bars, like this kind of areas, I'm gonna get misted. Yeah, it's brutal.
But they have, it looks like they have irons.
Where do you meet? Saul Russell?
Oh, I just didn't know he walked in, she was already getting there early. Because none of the photos were outside.
Is that who he was? Where's he from? Practically neighbors.
Morning, everyone. Running a little bit late because the prayer breakfast ran over. Earlier this morning, as you know, we gathered for the National Prayer Breakfast, a time-honored tradition to gather in faith, fellowship, and humility, as well as prayer. The values expressed by many people at the prayers breakfast, as they led us in prayer, were in stark contrast with the president's unconstitutional, immoral, and dangerous ban on refugees and citizens of Muslim countries coming into the United States. The president claims this is about security, but national security experts are urgently speaking out. The president's cruel and reckless ban makes America less safe. Over 900 American diplomats have risked their careers to send the message that the president's ban makes America less safe. Again, protecting our nation, and that's our first responsibility, to protect and defend our Constitution and the American people, requires us to be smart and strong, not reckless and rash. 3 times, House Republicans have blocked Democrats' emergency bill to rescind the ban. It's called the Statue of Liberty Values Act. We will continue to explore all of our legislative and legal options to overturn this dangerous ban. What's making America less safe is to have a white supremacist named to the National Security Council as a permanent member, while the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the director of national intelligence are told, don't call us, we'll call you. You're no longer permanent members. We'll call you when we need whatever judgment they make about when they want them to come back. It's a stunning thing that a white supremacist, Bannon, would be a permanent member of the National Security Council and dismissing chairman of Joint Chiefs and the director of national intelligence as permanent members. You probably are aware of this, but I found it intriguing that House Oversight Committee Chairman John Chaffetz told the Washington Post that he was weighing legislation that in essence says if you're going to have your hands on the nuclear codes, we should probably know what mental state you're in. I can't wait until he introduces that legislation to be able to join and co-sponsor that, as Mr. Cummings has also said. I think it's a very good idea. Again, the public outcry toward the president's dangerous ban over the weekend was massive, and the president is clearly eager to shift attention away. You notice that every time something gets hot, he changes the subject. He's an illusionist. If you see now, you see it. Now you don't. So when the heat was turned up by people turning out at airports throughout the country, probably surprised him. He decided to move up his announcement of his Supreme Court justice from Thursday to Tuesday. So on Tuesday night, the president announced his pick for the Supreme Court, Judge Gorsuch. He is far outside the mainstream of American judicial thought. In terms of women's rights, Women's Rights and Hobby Lobby, the judge singled out women's health for discrimination and enabled employers to meddle into their workers' most intimate reproductive health decisions. When it came to workers and consumers, as a judge and in private practice, he consistently sided with powerful corporate interest against consumers. If you care about clean air, clean water, food safety, safety of medicine, workers' rights, shareholders' rights, class action suits against fraud in the securities industry, if you care about the enforcement with the values of the IDEA, addressing the concerns of children with disabilities, and saying, in his case, children with autism should not have access to the same opportunities to reach their intellectual and personal best. This is what he has chosen. Elections have ramifications. He also, you all recall what a triumph the marriage equality decision was in the courts. That took action going through the courts, and he has criticized the progressives and condemned those who have turned to the courts to advance LGBT equality. But again, elections have ramifications, and as he has said, the president has said, far back as June, he saw a list of people who met the standard for the far right for issues that relate to a woman's right to choose, marriage equality, and more. And he made that commitment, which he honored in the worst possible way. Tuesday, that same day that he made that announcement, also marked the end of the open enrollment period for the insurance marketplace under the Affordable Care Act. By Christmas Eve, just to go back a few weeks, 11.5 million people were already signed up, outpacing the year before. California even extended the deadline for enforcement until February 4th to accommodate the large surge in enrollment. You had to sign up, but you can complete your application in another few days. Republicans continue to try to create uncertainty and sabotage the marketplace. Last week, the Trump administration abruptly canceled much of the advertising and outreach to efforts that helped remind Americans that time was running out for them to complete their applications. This never contrast this with many of you weren't here, but when Medicare Part D was debated in the Congress under the presidency of President George W. Bush, we overwhelmingly opposed it. So it was a giveaway to the pharmaceutical industry, and one of the reasons that our deficit was increased, our national debt was increased, take that from the Congressional Budget Office, not from me, because of the high cost and giveaways to the pharmaceutical companies. So we opposed it, but it became law, and our offices facilitated the opportunity for constituents to take advantage of it. Our responsibility is to our constituents. This is outrageous that they would say, we're not even going to let you know what the law allows you to do because we're philosophically opposed. It's just another example of they're not trying to make America great again. They're trying to make America sick again. And this will lead to suffering, death, disability. It's a tragedy. But we are going to make that fight. But in the meantime, the disruption to the marketplace, because this is a marketplace-oriented event, the exchanges and any additional uncertainty that is injected there by this administration just it's not constructive, and they want it to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. See, we did this, so it didn't work, and therefore it didn't work, not having anything to do what we did. Make America sick again. Any questions? Let me see a new person. Okay, you.
I like the old people. Have you had any conversations with GOP leaders about the Obamacare replacement and possibly finding ways that Democrats could work with Republicans?
No. We're waiting to see what they have to offer. The repeal and replace, as I said before, has alliteration, but it doesn't really have the votes, and we haven't seen anything yet. The president says it's going to be beautiful. We're going to see it any minute, any second, any nanosecond, but we haven't seen anything yet. But hopefully we will, and then we can act upon that. But we haven't seen anything yet. In the meantime, what is happening across the country is members of Congress are hearing from their constituents. And it's one thing to pass a bill and say, this will be good for you. It's another thing to say, we're taking this away from you. And I think that some of their vocabulary is changing on this subject. You're using words like rebuild or those kinds of words rather than, you'll hear less and less of repeal. That's of a Tea Party orientation, but not really what we think will happen. The other part of it is people are seeing the connection between the Affordable Care Act, Medicare, and Medicaid. And in the Affordable Care Act, we prolong the life of Medicare. We provide additional benefits to seniors for free exams that has helped them be healthier, intervening sooner, closing the donut hole. That means lowering the cost of their prescription drugs. And if you repeal that, again, prolonging the life of Medicare for 10 years or more of solvency. If you repeal that, you seriously undermine Medicare. At the same time, in their budget, they want to turn Medicare into a voucher. In other words, remove the guarantee. Medicare is a guarantee. You remove the guarantee, you remove Medicare. And then in terms of Medicaid, which is a very important part of this, people think of it in the good way that it is about helping poor children and working parents and the rest, and that's a good thing, but probably a large number of children take care of it. Probably 1/5 of the money is spent on children because a large amount of the money is spent on seniors. Half the dollars spent in nursing homes are Medicaid dollars. This is for middle-income families who have spent down their assets and now qualify for Medicaid, and they're in these hospitals. You can also, in case you have grandparents who fall into this category, you can also have a daycare. You can drop off your elderly parents or grandparents for daycare under all of this. But what the Republicans want to do is block grant, shrink Medicaid, and that is something that the Republican governors in many of the states are arguing against. So it's not just about poor children and their parents. It's not just about people with disabilities, however worthy that would be justification enough. It's about seniors. And it's also about opioids. Don't take it from me. The governor of Ohio has said, thank God for Medicaid, because that's going to help us address the opioid addiction. So, again, I think that Tea Party probably wants to get rid of Medicaid, but I think that will be problematic in the discussion. But the public has to understand what this means to them, not as public policy or their ideology about no role of government, but what it means to you and to your family, and in terms of all of this. Now, I won't go into all of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, not only the 20 million people and growing who now have access, who didn't have access before, but the over 150 million people who get their health insurance from in the workplace, who now have no pre-existing condition being a barrier to insurance, no lifetime limits or annual limits on their care. Being a woman is no longer a pre-existing condition. Kids can stay on the policy until 26 years old. Insurance companies are required to spend 80% of the money they receive on health care and meeting the needs of their policy holders and not advertising CEO pay, growing, and the rest of that. So there's a lot of merit in the Affordable Care Act of itself. It's being wedded to Medicare and Medicaid as it was in the legislation. Now, the states, there are over like 111 Republican members who are in states that had expanded Medicaid, and they're going to see something snatched away from their constituents. They need to know about that. Some of their governments are arguing, don't touch that. Yeah, Deidre?
I wanted to ask you about the Trump administration's first national security operation overseas in Yemen.
Mm-hmm.
I know you get briefed on these things, and
Yeah.
you can't talk about classified
Right.
material, but based on what you know about the operation, are you satisfied with sort of what happened in the green light to go ahead with the raid, even though it did result in the death of American soldiers?
Well, Deidre, I'm looking for more information. The Department of Defense has put out a pretty thorough after-action review, which is what you do after something. What is the after-action review on it? But I haven't been briefed directly on it with questions that I may have, and I look forward to that. So I don't want to say anything about that right now except to be sad about the loss of life that happened there and to say that intelligence matters in terms of actions taken, timing, and the rest of that. You have to be ready.
Do you get the sense that they weren't ready?
I don't know. That's what I'm looking to see. Yes, Chad, you can go now.
I know on opening day or inauguration day, you and the other congressional leaders were with President Trump over on the Senate side thing.
Right.
And one thing I noticed is everyone seemed to be cheery and optimistic and things. And in the past 14 days, can you kind of describe, and you went through a number of policy areas, ideological areas, Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
How has your crest fallen over those 14 days? And is there something specific that is where you're the most disappointed?
Well, it isn't a question of crest fallen. My crest fell on Election Day, but you're ever hopeful. I don't have great expectations from what I have heard, but that day was a matter of courtesy. The peaceful exchange of power is a question of courtesy. It wasn't anything jovial or lighthearted about it. It was a question of courtesy. Please don't mistake courtesy for approval or anything else positive. The next day was less crestfallen when on January 20th, we had the peaceful transfer of power with the inauguration of a new president. The next day, we had the peaceful show of power with millions of women, men, and families turning out across our country and across the world to say, here we are, we're paying attention, and we have concerns. Many of them marched to protect our care. So I was very happy about that, but they had other issues as well. It was organic, it was spontaneous, it wasn't organized by any elected officials or political party. It was the people turning out. I thank them for that show of we are listening, we are watching, look at us. But also, I think that led to people showing up at the airports last weekend. They saw their power, they knew their power, and they said, okay, we'll show up again. Thousands of people across the country and into airports that really didn't have some of the challenges that we had, for example, in San Francisco, Kennedy, and other places. So that is where you're less crestfallen. And then, of course, on the steps of the Supreme Court, we're having a press conference, and thousands of people showed up there. So I think that you've heard me say it over and over. President Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. And the more the public shows that they are aware of what is happening, the more they hold us all accountable, Democrats and Republicans alike. This isn't political. This is about America. It's about a patriotic duty to be informed and to weigh in and hold people accountable whose decisions affect their lives. So that is what lifted my spirits, the Women's March, and certainly not the inauguration. Yeah.
Yes, regarding Rex Tillerson, are you concerned now that he's been confirmed that there'll be moves by the White House or the State Department to lift sanctions on Russia?
Well, I would be concerned about it. I don't know. I mean, what the president has to understand is that when you're president of the United States, your words weigh a ton. So even with your administration putting out, we're going to review that, is really staggeringly dangerous. Because the sanctions on Russia, because of their aggressive military behavior, are very important to our allies in Europe and to global security. I've visited Ukraine, I've visited the countries and talked to members of the EU about this, and this would so seriously undermine our NATO alliance as well if these sanctions have to be multilateral, and they're hurtful, especially to the Europeans who have proximity, but the fact is they're necessary. So there should be no doubt in anyone's mind as to where we are on the sanctions. They're not there. Somebody said, what was the statement? They said, if they reduce their nuclear arsenal, then we'll lift the sanctions. Sanctions have nothing to do with their nuclear arsenal. They have to do with their military aggression. And that's where the relationship is. So I'm concerned about it, but as I've said before, I'm more concerned about what do the Russians have on Donald Trump that he's all of a sudden flirting with the idea that he might lift those sanctions.
Has there been any discussion of legislation to codify the sanctions? At least on the House side, I know that there's been discussion on the Senate side.
I don't know of any. The sanctions exist. I don't think there should be any doubt as to whether they will be enforced. The president has to make that clear. He has to make that clear. Otherwise, Putin will be laughing all the way to the bank and also to the military front. Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask you about non-disclosure agreements and whether you believe it's appropriate for congressional staffers who are paid by the American taxpayer to sign them to work with the administration.
Question is about non-disclosure agreements, in case you didn't hear that. No, I don't think it is appropriate at all. And what bothers me, in addition to that, is that non-disclosure agreements on the part of the administration with members of the staff of the House of Representatives is a serious separation of power issue, A. B, it's in keeping with a non-transparency attitude of the administration, where they're saying no tweets from the EPA and other places, and jeopardizing the rights of whistleblowers in our system. And so transparency is a very important value that is produces better results for the American people, and what they're doing is shutting down. In fact, they want to shut you down. And I think that our press, the freedom of the press, is their biggest guardian of our democracy. And you see this being heralded around the world as a concern that other journalists have in other countries, that nationalist governments coming in there might have the same attitude. So we're all in this together about openness in government, transparency in what we do. And this non-disclosure is just another manifestation of their suppressing information. I've had conversations with our ranking member on the committee, Mr. Conyers. They're having a hearing today. I don't know that it's not on this subject, but it may be brought up there. But we definitely cannot ignore what has happened there. Yes, ma'am.
Something that you just said, you mentioned the vocabulary change by
Yes.
Republicans coming about.
Right, on ACA.
A lot of discussion over this use of repair. They are pushing back, the Republicans, and saying that's directed at the healthcare system, not the healthcare law.
Oh.
Do you buy that explanation?
Well, the healthcare system is what it is, and the legislation, if we had no healthcare system, we probably would have had a single payer with community health centers all over the country as the bulk of delivery of service to our people. But we do have a healthcare system, and some of the legislation and some of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, we attempted to affect behavior of how doctors charge, behavior, how safety in hospitals is protected, and how we address disparities among minorities, how we address culturally appropriate approaches to healthcare, but also how we rely more on technology in terms of electronic medical records and the rest of that. So the legislation, in order to honor our three pillars of our three goals, which were to expand coverage, which we have done by 20 million at least people, and improve benefits, which we have done for everyone in our country, including the 155 million who get their coverage through the workplace, and third, to a lower cost. In all of these areas, we have been successful. We need to be more successful in lowering cost because, well, we have to address the prescription drugs, which are the biggest increase in our care. But the rate of growth of healthcare in our country is the lowest in the 50 years they have been measuring it. So certainly, as you expand, improve, and lower cost, you're addressing some of the systems of our health care. I named just a few, but the bill is fraught with things that improve. It's value, not volume. That's one of the important principles of the Affordable Care Act. Value. What is a it's it's not about procedures, it's about progress in the health of the person. So, in other words, if you live in a place where a person goes in and they receive care, but the care is not as valued-based as it should, and they're dismissed, and then they come back, readmittances caused a great deal of the cost, increased a great deal of the cost. So the bill, again, has as one of its priorities, value, not volume of services, progress, not a number of procedures. So that's really written into the bill. If they have any good ideas, we'd love to hear them. They've had 7 years to come up with it, and so far we hear vocabulary changes and the rest. But hopefully we can find some common ground to go forward. But we will stand our ground to protect the Affordable Care Act because we believe it is a right. Healthcare is a right for everyone, not just a privilege for the few. That's it? Is that it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Usually on time.
Did she have to just wait?
Did you?
And Anna said she did. And the wiretap is that. Anna said she did a lot of, he.
One final mic test, 1, 2, 3. Mic test, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you.
Probably, but I. It could have been any, it could have been somebody standing in the back.
What's up?
Hey, Scotty. Morning, everybody. Well, we continue to make progress on our agenda for the American people. By the end of this week, the House will have taken action to block 5 costly Obama administration regulations, including a rule that threatens to wipe out thousands of jobs in coal country. With a vote in the Senate and a signature by the president, we will be able to bring immediate relief to those workers. And this is just the start. In the weeks ahead, we will act on more resolutions to deliver relief from excessive regulations. When you think about the fact that the Obama administration was issuing major regulations at a rate of 1 every 3 days, this is real sea change. This is job creation. We also continue to act on a step-by-step approach to repeal and replace Obamacare. Yesterday, the Energy and Commerce Committee, they held a legislative hearing on 3 bills to improve Medicaid. Today, the committee is holding a legislative hearing on another 4 bills to provide relief from collapsing markets. In 2009, President Obama said, and I quote, "My guiding principle is that consumers do better when there is choice and competition," close quote. I couldn't agree more. That is the way Obamacare was sold, but that is not how it has turned out. In fact, choice and competition have dropped so much in our health insurance markets that 1/3 of all the counties in America today have only one insurer to choose from. 5 states, one insurer to choose from. That is not a choice. That is a monopoly. On top of that, another 37% of all counties in America have only 2 insurers to choose from. That is 70% of all the counties in America have a monopoly or a duopoly. President Obama was right. Consumers do better when they have choice and competition. Right now, they have neither. Instead, they're paying a whole lot more for less every single day under this law. That is why we have to step in. This law is collapsing. We have to rescue people from the failure of this law. And that is why, step by step, we're going to keep our promise to repeal and replace this law so that consumers can do better and so that they can have more choices. Questions?
Speaker Ryan, 2 religion questions.
2 religion questions? Are you going to wait till Sunday, or are you? Yeah.
So
Okay.
the president said that he wants to get rid of the Johnson Amendment. Is that?
I've long believed that. Yeah, I've always supported that.
And the other, would you support a religious freedom executive order if it allowed discrimination against gays and lesbians?
I'm not sure you're familiar. I'm not familiar with what you're talking about, so I'm going to pass on that. We don't want the Little Sisters for the Poor to be forced to buy coverage that violates their conscience. If you're talking about that, then I'm full support. Casey.
Two questions also, if I may. First, there's been reports of a very difficult call between the President and the Prime Minister of Australia. Now, John McCain is called the Australian ambassador. Do you think that what McCain did was the right move? And what would you say to President Trump about...
Don't know about the veracity of those. What you're talking about, so I'm going to
There's
pass
a lot
on
of
that.
talk about the possibility of...
We don't want the Little Sisters for the Poor to be forced to buy coverage that violates their conscience. If you're talking about that, then I'm full support. Casey.
Two questions also, if I may. First, there's been reports of a very difficult call between the President and the Prime Minister of Australia. Now, John McCain has called the Australian ambassador. Do you think that what McCain did was the right move? And what would you say to President Trump about...
Don't know about the veracity of those reports. Don't know about the content of the call, or even, I didn't hear about John McCain until what you just said. I know Prime Minister Turnbull. He was in my office a couple months ago. He's a very important ally. Australia is a very essential ally. They are, and they will continue to be. I think it's important that presidents and prime ministers, heads of state, are able to have candid and private conversations with one another.
My second question.
Wait,
The President also referenced Arnold Schwarzenegger today at the prayer
did he?
breakfast, and Schwarzenegger has
Did he do the
announced
accent?
that they should
or-
switch jobs. Should
Say that
switch
again?
jobs? Schwarzenegger tweeted to the President that perhaps they should switch
Oh.
jobs. Trump should return to The Apprentice.
Yeah.
He should be President of the United States.
I'm not going to comment on this stuff. Let's talk about policy. Let me go in the back.
Sir, you often mention about choice in healthcare. Is there some particular model you have in mind for that? I mean, most employer-based health programs have one, maybe two choices for insurance. I mean, what is the model for that you would point to?
Yeah, the model is the plan we ran on last year that you can go to better.gop and take a look at. What we think is you want to have a vibrant individual market, a vibrant employer market. We want Medicaid to work. We want Medicaid to work so that the states can innovate and so that doctors actually take Medicaid patients. We want Medicare to be solvent. We want Medicare to be something you can depend on and know that it's going to be there when you retire. So what we mean is choices. We don't want one choice. That's not a choice. We want to have more insurers and providers in the marketplace competing against each other for our business as consumers and patients. We want patients and their doctors being the driving force and the nucleus of the healthcare system instead of some government regulator telling you what you have to buy, where you have to buy it. We don't want just one insurer. We want a lot of insurers competing for our business. That's what I mean when I say choice. And the whole point of all of this is it's the cornerstone of the free enterprise system in America. The more choices you have, the more competition there is, consumers benefit from that. And that is obviously true in healthcare. And it is one of the big reasons why Obamacare is collapsing. Look, you heard me say how few choices and options there are because of Obamacare. It is not coincidental then that we have double-digit premium increases every year, that the deductibles for Obamacare exchange plans are 3 times as high as the deductibles for people in the large group insurance market that they get the health care from their jobs. So clearly this law isn't working. It is collapsing. And yes, this is what we call a death spiral. You're not getting the kind of pooling that needs to be allowed with choice and competition to get rates down. So we had to step in and replace this law before it gets too late, before people lose what their insurance.
Can I ask you about all this discussion about the word repair that you guys are starting to use?
Yeah, the words you're talking about.
The words. There's been some pushback on that, and Nancy Pelosi just said you guys are having a vocabulary change. The allegation there that you're intentionally rebranding this. Can you respond to that?
No, I'd say there's just a miscommunication or a misinterpretation of what we're trying to say. Our job is to repair the American healthcare system and rescue it from the collapse that it's in. And the best way to repair our healthcare system is to repeal and replace Obamacare. It's not an either or. If you want to repair the American healthcare system, you've got to repeal the law that is destroying it and replace it with a system that's much better. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Lisa from the PBS NewsHour. Can you
Hey,
give us,
thanks for. I know most of you, but thank you for saying we are.
can you give us an update on the timeline for the Affordable Care Act next step? I talked to Chairman Upton. He said he wasn't sure exactly when his committee was going to be moving language. And then also a follow-up to Nancy's question. Do you believe that businesses should be allowed to refuse service based on sexual identity or sexual orientation?
No, I voted for ENDA 2004 or something like that. I can't remember when that
But
bill
if it's
was.
based on religious grounds?
So, no, I just don't believe in discrimination in the workplace, period. But back to your healthcare point, what was your healthcare question?
The timeline.
The timeline, yeah. So I'll defer to the chairman when he wants to have his markups, but we want to be moving our Obamacare legislation by the end of the first quarter. Yeah.
Do you support capping the exclusions for employer-sponsored plans?
I always have. That's something. I mean, there's no secret. The bills I put in place. I had a bill with Tom Coburn, Devin Nunes, and Richard Burr when we were debating Obamacare that did that. So my own position is very clear. Where Congress goes on this is an open question on that thing. That's one of the ways you can finance tax credits. There are a lot of other ways of financing tax credits as well. Yeah.
You obviously spoke out forcefully last year about the Muslim ban. I'm wondering if you're totally comfortable right now with Trump's executive order and the provisions that give preferential treatment to minority religion.
That's a good question because this is not a Muslim ban. If it were, I would be against it. We are a tolerant, pluralistic country. We are and we will be. It's really important. The bill we passed last year, if you recall, after the Paris shooting, it became clear to us that one of the terrorists infiltrated the refugee population coming from Syria. So we wanted to make sure that didn't happen here in this country. That's just sort of like national security 101. And then when we inquired among our professionals at Homeland Security and the FBI, can you properly vet these people to make sure that this doesn't happen in America? They said, no, we can't. And so that's why we passed legislation with 289 votes, big bipartisan bill, saying let's pause this program until we can figure out how to get it right. That's effectively what this is about. So to your point about religious persecution, presidents always and often put preferences in refugee populations. I think President Obama had one for sexual orientation. They didn't call that a sexual orientation test. He put a preference in for sexual orientation. Religious minorities who are being persecuted, there's nothing wrong with preferring religious minorities from persecution. Yazidis are being persecuted. Sunnis in Shia countries are being persecuted. Christians are being persecuted. So there's nothing wrong with saying we're going to take into account minority religious persecution with our refugee situation. Chad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What about, though, and this alludes to the question about Australia, deals with the question here with the executive order, what about the perception overseas? And do you have concerns?
Yeah, no, of course I do. Of course I do.
As a Muslim ban?
I think
people say he did get into the grill of the Australian Prime Minister.
I think, well, like I said, I didn't even read the transcript, so I can't speak to the
but
president's.
That's a perception issue. Even if that's not true, there's a perception
issue. But I do think that there is a perception issue, and I think this loose rhetoric that suggests that this is a religious test or Muslim ban is wrong because it furthers that perception because this is not that. So I do think it's important for people to pause and look at the actual context of this. Look at the press conference that Secretary Kelly had to put this in its proper perspective so that it is not misinterpreted as being something that it is not.
That isn't the point. He had to have that press conference to do that. He had to give that statement Sunday afternoon.
I said this on Tuesday. I think the rollout could have been done a lot better. Look, green card holders. I mean, nobody wanted green card holders to get caught up in this. So I think that, yes, the rollout could have been done much better. I think we all know that. But going forward, let's make sure that we're not saying this is something that it's not, so that we further misperceptions.
Mr. Speaker, regarding Rex Tillerson.
Tell me who you are.
Andrew Feinberg with RIA Global Newswires. Regarding Rex Tillerson's confirmation, are you concerned that now that he's through the Senate and the State Department, that the Trump administration will now try and relax sanctions on Russia?
Well, my position on sanctions are pretty clear. I think Rex Tillerson is going to be a great Secretary of State. I think people who don't know him or haven't followed him very closely are going to be pleasantly surprised. This is a very, very capable man, and I think he's a good model for Secretary of State. I don't know what their policy is going to be with Russia. I'm a Russia hawk. I think the sanctions should have been done a while ago.
Do you think that
Sherman?
Do you think a lot of this stuff you talk about the rollout, if this came through Congress, wouldn't this have been a more smooth process?
Are you talking about the executive order?
Yeah.
Yeah, I obviously think that they could have done a better job on the rollout of the executive order. I think that they don't even have a full cabinet in place yet. So I think it's pretty important to get their cabinet up and running so that these interagency reviews can be done well. And I think going forward, they're going to do a better job of these things. Yeah.
Speaker, I'm Stephanie March from Australian Broadcasting. Donald Trump tweeted this morning that he's going to review this so-called dumb deal with Australia. That's the first we've heard from the President directly about what's been a very confusing series of messages from the White House and the State Department and Australia. Is it problematic that this is the way diplomacy is being conducted, and should Australia be worried about its relationship with this new president?
No, I don't think Australia should be worried about its relationship with our new president or with our country for that matter. I know your country well. I've met with your leaders continuously over the last number of years. So no, Australia is a very important, essential ally. It's going to continue to be. You haven't maybe been to many press conferences. I typically don't quote I would be in favor of additional sanctions on Iran. I think I'd like to put as much toothpaste back in the tube as possible. I think the last administration appeased Iran far too much. I think they went too far with Iran, and I think as a result, Iran is far more activist than it otherwise would be. Iran, don't forget, is the largest, greatest sponsor of terrorism in the world, the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Iran writes on their missiles in Farsi, Hebrew, and English, death to America, death to Israel, and then tests them. So this is not a friendly country that has global peace or national security interests in their mind. So yeah, I think we need to have a tough on Iran policy.
But do you have any concerns that that could cause the nuclear agreement to...
I think we should stop appeasing Iran.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure.
And we would like him to be the leadoff witness. And I want to acknowledge Attorney Stephen Cohen of Tennessee, who has joined us.
Jerry Nadler.
Oh, and Gerald Nadler of New York, another member of the House Judiciary Committee. Attorney Khan, would you begin us off? We're with 7 witnesses. We're going to try to do this with a sense of brevity, but please begin.
Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely.
Leader Pelosi, Chairman, Honorable Member of the House, I sit before you. I'm a Virginian. I come from Charlottesville, Virginia, city of Thomas Jefferson. Our mayor has declared Charlottesville to be the center and the capital of resistance throughout the period of this administration. I am heartened to sit among patriots. I am able to speak because of the civil rights leaders of the past and today that brought us here. Because of the sacrifices of those leaders and the leaders sitting before us. That is why I am able to speak. So I honor you all, and I honor the leaders of our civil rights that have brought us here. You know the atrocities of these 10 days that had been inflicted on my country and on my nation. My nation and my country remains alienated, not within, but throughout the country. I want to make instead of explaining what atrocities other members, witnesses will explain that, but I want to emphasize on the call of duty for all of the patriots. Leader Pelosi, this time has chosen all of you, and you especially, to lead this nation, to lead this country. The only solution to these atrocities is to gain control of the Congress. That is where lies the solution. I will walk barefoot to every district that you will send me. People are ready. I have traveled to 83 communities throughout the country. People
Nice to see you again. Yeah, Spencer Johnny, how are you? Okay. Excited to see you.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you, Senator. Good to see you. We're going to start getting our trade in order, and I know you like that. Well, it's going to be one thing we really get along on, right? Yes, sir. I think. So thank you all for being here today. Great honor. We have put together an all-star team of top-level people that are working on trade. We are working very, very hard and will be very soon. As soon as we get the go-ahead, we have the 90-day period that we have to think about. But we want to get that whole thing kick-started and going. We have some statutory limits, and we don't want to have those statutory limits, so it's very important. I have very serious concerns about NAFTA. NAFTA has been a catastrophe for our country. It's been a catastrophe for our workers and our jobs and our companies. They're leaving our country. I want to change it, and maybe we do it. Maybe we do a new NAFTA, and we put an extra F in the term NAFTA. You know what the F is for, right? Yeah. Free and fair trade. Not just free trade, free and fair trade, because it's very unfair. So all of the statutory guidelines we're adhering to, I would like to speed it up if possible. You're the folks that can do it, Senator, so important. And we will make great trade deals, and we will have something that will, I don't care if it's a renovation of NAFTA or a brand new NAFTA, but we do have to make it fair, and it's very unfair to the American worker and very, very unfair to companies that do business in this country. That's why they're leaving, one of the many reasons, including the taxes are too high. We're going to take care of that also. You all know Wilbur Ross. He's one of the great people of Wall Street, and he's going to be representing us in negotiations along with a lot of other great people. So we've really assembled tremendous talent, some of the best in the world. Carl Icahn called me, said, I can't believe you got Wilbur. Wilbur on Wall Street is just known as Wilbur. And he's one of the greats. And he's fair. And he's fair to other countries. He will be fair to other countries. And I think we're going to have a whole new picture by the time we finish. So I just want to thank the four of you for being here. We're starting the process, and I think it's going to be a tremendous thing for our country, for the workers, and for our companies that employ the workers. And thank you all for being here. Okay? Thank you.
Check 1 2 1 2 3. 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 5 4 3 2 1. 1 2 3 4 5 5 4 3 2 1. Moi, je reconnais rien, j'avoue rien.
back. I haven't done this entire administration. Hey, first for everything. I guess so. This is our first passing of the flag.
No monitors today, no Skype guys today?
Skype guys? I double checked it. You guys in the office, they said, check with people that fed it down yesterday. They said no. Well, that was fun while it lasted. Actually, I thought it went great yesterday. I was surprised. Sending a story that paranoid is surprised. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot going on there. Yeah. I'm in parts of that. Yeah. So that's what. That's the thing. So we have a few days on that. I'm going to try one right now and see. Michelle's here. Hey, this is Chris. Cool. Yeah, so I think I've just punched up. I could get Kristen to run over there and touch it so you can match cameras.
Audio check, test 1 2, test 1 2. Testing 1 2 3.
Yeah. So I'm kind of excited. Sure, go for it. So she just said, just stay in front. Yeah, she's walking over there now. That's her cell phone. Yes, right. Yes. Their camera is what we do. We use the logo. Yeah. Okay, all right. You should have it. Yeah, so I hope they have me close just because of my eyes. I'm using the areas of diabetes. So I lost my eyesight. I can't drive. She went to the back to punch it out, but Mary's back there now. So. Okay. I was wondering when you're gonna put that together.
I'm controlling the camera with my mind.
You're amazing. What a tech. What a tech. So the focus
That I'm not very smart.
My focus is always off anyway. Change your focus with your mind. Well,
Sometimes I think I can.
We both white balance just a little bit ago. I'm in 1C with the white balance.
Do you want to do another one?
Want to check our presets against each other?
I'm looking this way on purpose. Does she want me to look forward?
As of right now, there is no Skype calls.
Sorry?
Yeah, I just got that from walking back. But he's standing at the ready in case he changes his mind. Before it is. Excellent. And this did get postponed to 12:30. Everybody knows that. Okay, very good. Cool. Yeah, we're keeping it. Both are on 1C with the white balance, so and everybody's happy. So there you go. Yes. It was a good weekend. I got a laser tag birthday party followed by a Japanese steakhouse and dinner. And next day, and Sunday, we went to the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl. The Super Nice cigar.
It'll be in 6th or 7th.
I don't know if that's good. You too, right? We see each other in the chat. That's where I see my, one day, somebody's going to be the first. I was friends with him.
I have stuff about that because I shot a lot of videos of that I won't put out. Well, I have one on the serious situation in a lot of devices. I'm about 5 or 6 but I have one on that. I met Andrew, and you know Andrew Breitbart, Hugging Post is his idea. So I interviewed him, and he was really well known. But I like his movie director, musician, so I came from somebody famous. So I told him, every day something never feeling really basic. He's the same age as my wife and my brother, 4 years and he I would love to hire a lady my woman on this story, because I don't want to get it wrong. So I think it's a good story. After he died, the New York Times, front page of the whole story, confirmed everything. When we reported it, very smart about it. The problem is I read the best story in the world.
See what I'm talking about? That's better for me.
Tell the good thing is that up here, it's a big, you can look, but it's fun. The bad thing is, it's a big which is, most of them like very small area. They're not trying to.
It's a can of blue spray paint. Is that gonna help? No, not a good idea.
No, I want a whole bucket.
It says the video was actually responsible, which is
Like say,
okay, that should post it,
do they?
It's up to this chap, this side. I see it from over here.
We're just not put blinders on you.
It just doesn't look
Take another look from back there.
Everybody else can bring it out, it's just me.
No, they
We're the only one with that angle.
Oh, okay.
It's a little funky. You guys moving everything? I mean, is it decent? You still don't know.
I don't know anything.
Yeah.
I'll send you Tom's. Okay. Yeah, this is not wrong. Yeah, it's not wrong. Yeah.
I got my phone.
You know what? We're going out. He set the wireless. Let's do it here.
Okay. Everybody's missing right now.
She'll be heading out just a second. Okay?
I don't see it. That's it,
Stephen, well done. Love your report. What's the location just back I actually
got into it fast.
you just watch TV. Here you go. No one talks about that. If you want to,
Anybody want to go?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, of course you can.
Sure, help yourself.
Oh, for goodness sake.
See what you caused, George? It's all over the place.
Yeah. Pro gum. Good.
Thanks, Mary.
You need a focus?
What? It's all good. It's there.
Thank you so much.
What about? What do you want? What do you want with it, Don? Go up? How's that? That good, Don? Sound good? Check, test. I don't know. They hadn't. They're where they were. You good?
Yeah, it wasn't really the same, but we'll get better. We'll get better. It's like my tap on it. I get out there like here to fit my yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I read it. I didn't see it.
We don't want
This is very important to have two crews over here. They don't have two crews. And about 6 return and that oval thing simultaneously,
About the no His daughter was born in Pyongyang. Oh yeah. They were the Black Panthers were brought into Tiananmen Square in the 70s and honors. You would like to try.
Sometimes she'll sneak out and then you'll be like, I'll try to announce it. No one pays attention.
Summer's gonna be summer long time. It's listen, apparently I was sort of testing illness. That's the same. I don't know. It's the same, but obviously.
He was like a hobo from the New York Times in London.
Was because I injured my shave. So usually we fight. Let's get along with it right now. Once we score the system, that's what they told us. They said the owners, the heads are sitting under a statue. And they're like,
Yeah, that's what I hear. You don't trust me?
So long ago. Making plans for the future, right? So we drop the boat. I remember seeing this racer at the debate. So long ago. Making plans for the future, right? So we drop the boat.
Good afternoon. Happy Groundhog Day. We've got 6 more weeks of winter, apparently. Luckily, for those of you who are going to be joining the president down to Florida this weekend, you get some time in, to get a glimpse of.
Hey. Lucy, how are you? Good.
Good afternoon. Happy Groundhog Day. We've got 6 more weeks of winter, apparently. Luckily, for those of you who are going to be joining the president down to Florida this weekend, you get some time in, to get a glimpse of summer at the Winter White House in Mar-a-Lago. The president's going to start his meeting at 1 o'clock sharp. You probably just saw the B-roll of the folks from Harley rolling on in, literally. So I'm going to try to keep this a little quick. The president signed a proclamation yesterday ushering in Black History Month. He looks forward to engaging in an informative month of events honoring the enormous contributions that African Americans have made throughout our history. Last night, the president was honored to host the swearing in of the next Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, in the Oval Office. As the president said last night, Secretary Tillerson is a man who's already respected all over the world for the tremendous life that he's led, and now will bring his years of experience to the critical task of making our nation more safer, more prosperous, and more secure. It's time to bring a clear-eyed focus to our foreign affairs, and now with Secretary Tillerson at the helm of the State Department, we'll do just that. We'll strengthen our alliances, form new ones, and enhance America's interests throughout the world. Speaking of the president's excellent nominees, praise is pouring in from around the country for his pick for Supreme Court. The Detroit News said Judge Gorsuch is a, quote, legal superstar, an outstanding choice, says the New Hampshire Union leader. The Richmond Dispatch says the initial reaction was to cheer. The South Florida Sun-Sentinel touted his, quote, excellent qualifications. Yesterday, Judge Gorsuch had his first round of meetings on the Hill. Unfortunately, Senate offices aren't in the habit of releasing editorials, but from everything we heard, the judge knocked it out of the park on the Senate as well. The president looks forward to a fair and speedy confirmation process for this exceedingly qualified nominee and jurist. In my last briefing, I read out a list of the senators Judge Gorsuch met with. In addition to the meeting with Majority Leader McConnell, Majority Whip Cornyn, Judiciary Chair Grassley, and Senators Hatch and Gardner, the judge also met with Democrat Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Recently, Senator Manchin expressed his belief that Judge Gorsuch could win enough Democrats to hit 60 votes. I'll agree with the senator there on that one. We have to have a few Trump state Democrats who want to win re-election. But as I pointed out yesterday, the so-called 60-vote standard is simply not accurate. Democrats are grasping at straws to block the confirmation of an unquestionably qualified nominee. I'll repeat, neither of the two Supreme Court justices that President Obama put forward were subject to the 60-vote threshold. So although I agree with Senator Manchin that Judge Gorsuch will probably get enough Democrats to get to 60, it's just simply not ever been a requirement. Now on to the events of today. The president started his day by attending the National Prayer Breakfast. It's a tradition that continued over 6 decades, going back to President Eisenhower. The president thanked the American people for their faith and prayers that have sustained and inspired him, noting that the 5 words that he has heard more than any others as he's traveled throughout the country are, "I'm praying for you." He spoke at length about the ISIS genocide against Christians and the oppression of peace-loving Muslims, as well as the threats of extermination against the Jewish people, and made it clear that he believes the United States has a moral obligation to speak out against such violence. He encouraged Americans to remain a tolerant society where all faiths are respected and where all of our citizens can feel safe and secure. With that goal in mind, the president remarked that he's taken action to ensure that the United States will not allow a beachhead of intolerance to spread throughout our nation. In the coming days, we'll develop a system to help ensure that those admitted into our country fully embrace our values of religious and personal liberty and reject any form of oppression or discrimination. The president also committed to get rid of the Johnson Amendment and allowing our representatives of faith to speak freely and without retribution. In a particularly poignant moment during his remarks, the president recalled yesterday his visit to Dover Air Force Base to join the family of Chief Ryan Owens as America's fallen hero was returned home. After honoring Chief Owens for giving his life in defense of the American people, the president quoted John 15:13, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." After returning to the White House this morning, the president held a legislative affairs staff meeting in the Oval Office with his team. The team continues to work closely with Congress to enact the president's agenda. With the nomination of Judge Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, extensive outreach is underway on Capitol Hill, and we look forward to the judge receiving a swift and fair hearing. Between his meetings, the president was pleased to see the EPA Administrator-designate Pruitt was voted out of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. As has unfortunately become the practice, the Democrats again boycotted the hearing, requiring a suspension of the rules in order to advance his nomination. Following the strategy session, the president met with Senators Hatch, Wyden, and Congressman Brady and Neal. This meeting was an opportunity for the president to meet with the chairman and ranking members of the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee to help chart the future of U.S. trade policy. The president has put together an all-star trade team that will work closely with the U.S. Trade Representative and the committees led by these members to craft new trade deals. The president has expressed his concern time and again with NAFTA, which he believes is an out-of-date agreement. The ultimate goal is to ensure that the best and fairest treatment of U.S. workers and businesses, and the president believes that those interests are best secured by bilateral rather than multilateral trade deals. He looks forward to working closely with the USTR and Congress when it comes to issues of trade. For those of you who weren't outside and just saw the Harleys roll up, it's no surprise that this afternoon the President will host a meeting and listening session with Harley-Davidson executives and union representatives. For a list of those individuals, please contact our office. Harley-Davidson's been an American success story since 1901, when William S. Harley, at age 21, completed the blueprint drawing of an engine designed to fit into a bicycle. In 1903, Harley-Davidson began building motorcycles in the United States, and today the company has approximately 6,000 employees and $6 billion in annual revenue. The company's global headquarters is located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which may have had something to do with them getting in so quickly. There's a certain staffer. Today, the President will welcome to the White House the latest generation of Harley-Davidson executives to discuss how to make it easier for businesses to create more jobs and factories in the United States. Beyond the company executives, representatives from the machinist and steelworkers unions will also be in attendance. Their motorcycles have carried our American service members in war. They carry our police officers. They keep us safe. They carry the Secret Service as they protect our presidents. And they bring joy to millions of Americans throughout the world, and others throughout the world, rather. The President's looking forward to hosting these leaders from one of America's truly great entrepreneurial success stories. The American worker built this country, and the President is focused on restoring a government that puts their interests first. A few administrative notes. The National Security Advisor, Mike Flynn, today announced additions to the NSC senior staff. David Cattler will be a Deputy Assistant to the President for Regional Affairs. John Eisenberg, Deputy Assistant to the President, NSC Legal Advisor and Department Counsel to the President for National Security Affairs. Kevin Harrington, Deputy Assistant to the President for Strategic Planning, and Kenneth Juster, Deputy Assistant to the President for International Economic Affairs. Lastly, we had a great reaction to our Skype introduction seats yesterday. I know we've had a tremendous amount of requests pouring in from around the country. Please contact the press office if you know of anyone that has an interest in joining us in the future. In terms of the schedule for tomorrow, the President will host a strategic and policy forum. Then in the afternoon, the President will have lunch with General Flynn before departing down to Mar-a-Lago later in the day. With that, I'll take some questions. Katie Pavlich.
Thanks for the question. Today, President Trump talked about Christian genocide at the National Prayer Breakfast, and last year, the Obama State Department officially declared a genocide by ISIS against Christians and other minority religious groups in the Middle East and North Africa. Now that Rex Tillerson has been sworn in as a secretary, what specifically is the administration planning to do to comply with the legal obligations of protecting these groups under the UN 1948 treaty?
That's a great question. I think Secretary Tillerson's learning his way around the building so far this morning. He gave a great speech talking about his vision and goal for the State Department. I think there'll be further guidance coming out on that, Katie. Right now, his job was to get in, get settled, talk to the employees, make sure they understood. But back to the issue. Obviously, it's important to the President. It was throughout the campaign. It's something that he addressed this morning, and it's something that he's committed to. Talked about in terms of the executive orders and allowing Christian minorities in key countries seek asylum in the United States. He recognizes that in so many nations, these are the oppressed groups in accordance with how the UN defines refugees. So I think you'll see further guidance with that. Jennifer Wisson.
Thanks, John. I have two questions, actually. Today, the President renewed his promise to protect religious liberty, which he says is under threat. Some Americans see religious liberty as code for discrimination. Can you kind of give us a sense of how the President views this tension?
It's an interesting question because I this is something that comes up quite a bit. I think there is a line. We have freedom of religion in this country, and I think people should be able to practice their religion, express their religion, express areas of their faith without reprisal. And I think that pendulum sometimes swings the other way in the name of political correctness. And I think the President and the Vice President both understand that one of the things that makes our country and this democracy so great is our ability to express our religion, to believe in faith, to express it, and to live by it. And that's where I think the important part is, whether it's a small business owner or an employee who wants to have some degree of expression of faith at the company. And too often those voices get pushed out in the name of political correctness. So he's going to continue to make sure that we not only speak up for it, but find ways in which we can keep that line a little less blurred and make sure that the pendulum doesn't swing against people. We shouldn't impose a religion on anybody. We're free to express our religion or not have one. That's obviously in our country an equally valid way of living your life. But at the same time, I think people who want to express their faith shouldn't be ostracized because they want to live that. Major.
If you could give us an example, if you could, of the pendulum swinging in the direction of political correctness, and how is that going to inform the president with his executive order? And as you may know, a draft is circulating around town, and many have wondered if that is going to be a way to either silence those on the left or be a threat to the LGBTQ community. Talk us through both those.
Well, I think if you look back to the Little Sisters case, if you look back to other businesses that were under Obamacare, what's that?
Would you put Hobby Lobby in that category?
I would, yeah, absolutely. I think there's several businesses and several institutions, Catholic institutions and others, that have been mandated or apparently attempted to mandate certain things that they may or may not do or how they have to treat their employees. Those are instances where clearly the pendulum's swinging a different way, where you are not carving out institutions or the ability for privately held businesses to conduct themselves to live according to their faith or their moral compass. And so there's clearly a lot of evidence in the last couple of years of the government coming in with regulations and policies that have, frankly, denied people the ability to live according to their faith.
From the president's point of view, that's discriminatory in itself.
Well, I think there's, like I said, I think it's a pendulum, and where the president is that he wants to make sure that you don't penalize someone for wanting to express their faith. And that to the extent that we can keep that line a little less blurred and allow people who don't believe in a faith or have an opposing faith, make sure that they are equally comfortable in the workplace. But we shouldn't penalize people or mandate them to abide by certain policies or regulations which are in direct contradiction to their faith.
And what about the executive order, Sean? How does
there's right now no executive orders that are official or able to read out. We maintain that. There's nothing new on that front. I'm not there until we have. It's not a question. There are a lot of ideas that are being floated out. I mentioned this the last couple of days, but that doesn't mean part of it is as the president does all the time. He asks for input. He asks for ideas, and on a variety of subjects, there are staffing procedures that go on where people have a thought or an idea and it goes through the process. But until the president makes up his mind and gives feedback back and decides that that's final, there's nothing to announce. Yeah.
John, thank you. In light of the tragedy that happened in Quebec City last week, which Prime Minister Trudeau is actually calling an act of terrorism, what is the president doing? What initiatives is he taking to make sure that that kind of homegrown, he was a Canadian citizen, homegrown terrorism, homegrown violence doesn't happen within our country?
Well, there's a lot of things. Number one, he's talked cybersecurity. I mean, he's looking at it from every angle. I think the first thing is to make sure that we look at our borders. You've got to protect your own people first. Then you've got to look at the cyber threats. So there is a holistic approach to both immigration, and there's a direct nexus between immigration and national security and personal security that he has to look at. But then it's a multi-tiered step. You look at the borders, you look at who we're letting in, then you also look at what we're doing internally with our intelligence agencies, from the FBI up, that make sure that we're looking at whether it's the cyber threats that we face or other terrorist activities, but making sure that we're working with the NSA and the FBI to be ahead of the curve, if you will.
If I may, these are homegrown. This
Right.
Oklahoma City was an American kid.
Sure.
Okay, that's what
I'm saying. But I think that part of it is looking at using the assets that we have here, the NSA, the FBI, looking at using the different agencies to see if we can get ahead of the curve and see things. And a lot of times that's been a very big issue, is getting ahead of the curve for when there are telltale signs, having reporting systems up, working with the various agencies. But it's a multi-effort process, if you will. Kristen.
Sean, thank you. Why is the administration easing sanctions against Russia?
We're not easing sanctions. The Treasury Department. It is, from what I understand, it's a fairly common practice for the Treasury Department, after sanctions are put in place, to go back and to look at whether or not there needs to be specific carve-outs for different, either industries or products and services that need to be going back and forth. But I would refer you back to the Treasury Department on that one.
Sean, hold on, Sean. The language on the Treasury Department website suggests that you are, in fact, easing sanctions. It authorizes certain transactions with the Federal Security Service. Does that not suggest a shift?
No, it doesn't.
From what
It is,
was
from what I understand, a regular course of action. The Treasury does quite often when there are sanctions imposed. But I would refer you back to the Treasury Department.
Comment on the call with Australia.
Thank you.
Could I ask you to describe the tone of the call on the weekend between the Australian Prime Minister and the President, and also outline the President's concerns about the refugee deal in question? And I asked you this earlier this week, but could you clarify whether the deal is on or not? Because the President tweeted last night, "I will study this dumb deal," implying that he's still considering it.
Right. The President had a very cordial conversation with Prime Minister Trumbull, where they went through an extensive discussion of this deal. The President is unbelievably disappointed in the previous administration's deal that was made and how poorly it was crafted and the threat to national security it put the United States on. He has tremendous respect for the Prime Minister and for the Australian people and has agreed to continue to review that deal and to ensure that as part of the deal, which was always part of it, that we would go through a very, very extreme vetting process to ensure that every single person that is being offered up is coming here with peaceful intentions and poses no threat to the United States. So he has ensured that while he has respect for the Australian people and respect for Prime Minister Trumbull, that we do not pose a threat to the United States of America, that the deal that he was cut by the last administration is something that he is extremely, extremely upset with. He does not like it, but out of respect for him, he's going to allow that process, continue to study, and allow it to move forward under the conditions that have been set, that there will be extreme vetting on every single one of those individuals.
Okay, but just for clarity,
Yeah.
the deal itself is still under review, so is not certain to proceed, or it will
part
proceed.
of the deal was that the deal allows for the United States to vet the individuals that are being offered up to be processed. The President's goal is to make sure that every single one of those people, in accordance with the deal and as discussed in the telephone conversation with the Prime Minister, is subject to extreme vetting to ensure that no one puts it. But I cannot underscore how disappointed he was in the deal that was made and how he thought it was just a horrible deal that was offered up by the United States by this previous administration. Sarah.
The President and his national security advisor have been clear that the administration wants to put Iran on notice, but they haven't specified what that is. What options are on the table, and are there any options like military action that might be off the table at this point?
So I think General Flynn was really clear yesterday that Iran has violated the joint resolution, that Iran's additional hostile actions that it took against our Navy vessel are ones that we are very clear are not going to sit by and take. I think that we will have further updates for you on those additional actions, but clearly we wanted to make sure that Iran understood that they are on notice. This is not going unresponded to. John.
Thank you very much, John.
Yes. Sorry, thank you. Sorry. Yes. Right, that's right. John, sorry.
Thank you, Sean. On January 27th at the Republican retreat in Philadelphia, Vice President Pence had a closed-door meeting with House Republicans where several of them brought up the case of IRS Commissioner John Koskinen. There was an attempt to impeach him last year, which some of the leadership in the House felt was unfair to the commissioner, and they urged him to tell the president that, given his entire record, he should fire him or ask for his resignation soon. My sources said the vice president said, "I can hear you." Is there any pending action on the fate of Commissioner Koskinen?
I have nothing to update you on. Hallie.
It was initially described, the raid over the weekend, as a successful raid by the administration.
Mm-hmm.
There are now some questions that CENTCOM is raising about the possibility of additional civilian casualties. So we've got a couple of questions for you on this one.
Yeah.
Would you still stand by your characterization as the raid is successful? Was the president given multiple options about this raid or just one? And were there consultations with the prior administration's national security officials, military officials about the raid moving forward?
Thank you. Actually, I'd like to just walk through that. I appreciate you bringing this up. There is some. Let's go through the TikTok on that raid. On November 7th, CENTCOM submitted the plan to DOD. Clearly, that was under the last administration. Legal teams were involved immediately when it was submitted to DOD. On December 19th, the plan was approved by the Department of Defense and recommended that it be moved ahead. It was sent then to the National Security Council staff here in the White House. Again, This all happened under the previous administration. On January 6th, there was an interagency deputies meeting. The deputies recommended at that time that they go ahead. It was so easily approved, it was sent straight up. The conclusion was at that time to hold for what they called a moonless night, which by calendar wouldn't occur until then President-elect Trump was President Trump. On January 24th, shortly after taking office, Secretary Defense, then Mattis, read the memo, resent it back up to the White House, conveying his support. On the 25th of January, the President was briefed by General Flynn on Secretary Mattis's recommendation and the status of the operation or potential operation. The President asked to see Secretary Mattis and Joint Chiefs of Staff Dunford. He then, on that evening, had a dinner meeting, which included the President, the Vice President, Secretary Mattis, Chairman Dunford, Chief of Staff Priebus, Jared Kushner, Chief Strategist Bannon, General Kellogg, General Flynn, and CIA Director Pompeo, where the operation was laid out in great extent. The indication at that time was to go ahead. On Friday, the 26th in the morning, the Deputies Committee met again. It was not a necessary step because they had previously recommended and also reaffirmed their support for that. On January 26th, the President signed the memo authorizing the action. So it was not only was it a very, very thought out process by this administration. It had started back in November 7th in terms of clearly well before that, but it was a move forward by CENTCOM on November 7th. This was a very, very well thought out and executed effort.
Where was the President the night of the raid? How did he learn about Chief Owens' death? And do you still stand by your characterization that it was successful?
The President was here in the residence. He was kept in touch with his national security staff. Secretary Mattis and others had kept him updated on both the raid and the death of Chief Owens, as well as the 4 other individuals that were injured. So he was kept apprised of the situation throughout the evening. And again, I think I would go back to what I said yesterday. It's hard to ever call something a complete success when you have the loss of life or people injured. But I think when you look at the totality of what was gained to prevent the future loss of life here in America and against our people and our institutions and probably throughout the world in terms of what some of these individuals could have done, I think it is a successful operation by all standards. It is, and again, I want to reiterate, it is tough to ever use the word success when you know that somebody has lost their life. But when you go back and look at an individual that dedicated their life to serving this country and went over and over and over again, knowing that this was not only the risk that he took, but wanted to do it because he knew the threat that these kind of individuals pose to our country and to our people. That's while not a success that you lost him, you know that he died in sacrifice for someone else here in this nation. Hunter Walker.
Thank you, Sean. I've seen some criticism of the president's remarks at the prayer breakfast this morning. Can you shed any light on why he thought that was a good venue to mock The Apprentice for its ratings?
Look, Mark Burnett, the creator of The Apprentice, who is a longtime supporter of the prayer breakfast, but also has a personal relationship, was there. He meant it as a lighthearted moment, and I think if you look at the totality of his remarks, and they were absolutely beautiful. And I think to hone in on that, it was a lighthearted moment he was trying to have with a big supporter of the National Prayer Breakfast and a personal friend. Guys, I'll be out tomorrow. I want to make sure we all get to see the president now. Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Picking a fight with Australia. Sean, why is the president...